Hello everyone. Today on Geoscientist Voices, we are breaking the mold on the linear academic career. My guest today is Dr. Jeremy Gabriel. He is currently a senior research associate at McMaster University in Canada, but his path has been incredible. He was a Zacharan postdoctoral scholar at the University of Haifa in Israel, a curriculum designer for a new program in Abu Dhabi, a coastal geologist in Saudi Arabia, and, believe it or not, a professional mortgage broker. Jeremy, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, Alexei. It's good to see you again. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, glad to see you too. So, I have to start with the most surprising line on your CV, for me at least. For 2 years, you worked as a sub mortgage broker in sales and finance. So, my question is most scientists are terrified of sales. How did that experience in the high pressure financial world change the way you approach science today? Is selling the mortgage actually similar to selling a research proposal?
Yeah, so the short answer to that is yes, it is very similar. And I understand the kind of fear of sales in most academics. But really, when you think about it, anytime you go to a conference, anytime you publish a paper, publish a research, you are selling your research to the scientific community. You need to convince them that your research filled a gap somewhere in our scientific knowledge. You need to convince them that your research has places to go, has places to grow. We can build something off of the results that you get. And this is kind of similar to what I'm doing with the mortgage. I need to know the state of the mortgage industry. I need to know the state of the real estate industry. Um, and importantly for my clients, this is a lot of money. This is a big thing that they are spending on, similar to a funding agency, a granting agency. They are giving you a lot of money to do this research. So you need to convince them that you have a good plan, you have a solid plan, you are aware of the environment, the circumstances that you find yourself in, to be able to get that across. The main difference being in that as a mortgage broker, I am focused entirely on what my clients want and I provide them options. Whereas as a researcher, it's more catered to my personal curiosities where I find a gap and I'm not trying to meet specific criteria that the funding agency wants. I am kind of providing those criteria that I will be exploring.
Wow, that's so interesting. So the skills are applicable anyway, as I see. And let's talk about the other skill that you got, and that is probably, and I'm sure it is applicable to science. So you hold a CAPM, Certified Associate in Project Management certification. Do you think academic researchers struggle with project management? What is the one thing from the corporate world you wish every PhD student knew about managing their time?
So, project management is crucial, and a lot of industries across the board struggle is maybe not the best term to use, but the Project Management Institute, who gives these certifications for the CAPM or the PMP, which is the more well-known one, the Project Management Professional. Their research shows that only about 48% of projects across all industries are considered successful, that they came in according to the predetermined scope, time, and budget. Those are the three main pillars that we look at when we're dealing with project management. Of course, we have other things, human resources management and conflict management and those kind of things. But so only 48% are considered successful, and actually 12% are considered failures, abject failures, because of cost overruns. Most of the time overruns, not planning out the scope. And this is very important to doing academic research as well. It's very easy to get bogged down in scope and wanting to develop this brand new, innovative, very intensive research program where you're analyzing data from maybe multiple regions in your country, maybe through multiple countries, maybe through multiple continents. And you get these ideas that this is going to be so great, all the amount of stuff I'm doing. The cost and the time play crucial factors in being able to accomplish all of those goals that you set out to do. The funding is a finite amount of funding, and almost any researcher that you encounter will quickly realize that the funding they receive for a project is very rapidly running out through different issues that come up, especially in the geosciences when we're dealing with a lot of field work, we're dealing with maybe remote areas to get to. Um, and so what PhD students in particular need to really be focused on, because they really only have kind of control of themselves, um, is being realistic in the definition of that scope, and making sure that it is something that can be accomplished in a fairly short amount of time. 4 years, when you first start, you think, oh, 4 years, I got a lot of time to do this. You yourself might be now realizing that, wow, 4 years is going by really fast and it's kind of just around
Yeah,
the corner, right? So being realistic with that and being realistic with the funds that you have to start. Now, this isn't to say that you should be sticking to one scope and never change your project. Of course, things change. You're going to discover things that you didn't really knew existed, discover relationships in the data. Maybe you're going to discover another research project that did something similar to yours, but they took a different approach than you are taking. And so now you want to investigate what are the differences between those, which is a very valid thing to be investigating. So you also then need to be ready to adapt and redefine that scope as you go, and not just waiting and kind of thinking, oh, I don't want to bother my supervisor. This is all I have. I'm just going to push through this. And then suddenly you get to the 3.5 year mark when you should be wrapping up your thesis and getting ready to submit. And you realize you're still a chapter short because you've spent so much time on chapter one and two. So addressing these potential changes early, it can help you with that. There are other sources of funding that you might go through. You're representing the AGU, the GSA, the Geological Society of America, the EGU. They all have these smaller grants that are available for graduate students that can kind of just get them over. Maybe you come up with a new analytical method that you want to try, but you didn't account for that in your original budget. Well, if I have thought this through and if I have enough time, I can apply for one of these new grants, which might give me just enough money to get that next set of data, get those next results, and finalize the project to something that I'm really happy with.
yeah, I totally understand what you're talking about. Being a PhD student now in Tel Aviv University, it's you have to plan everything ahead, and I think it's pretty hard. If I may ad lib question or my thought that it's really hard to account for everything that can happen in this like future 4 years, especially in this world where you've got so many research that like they come out every day, and you have to account for them. And I mean, if the discovery has been made and which you're working on, you have to sort of shift your focus, all these kind of things. So I think it's there is like much more pressure than has been like maybe years before. So it's like kind
For
of
sure.
a big
And I mean, you think like when you start your PhD and you're doing your literature review off the bat, maybe you have a window of say like 5 years that you're trying to stick to, and you're trying to keep your literature review to recent stuff within the past 5 years. Well, by the time you're at the end of your PhD, that stuff is already 10 years old. You
yeah.
add another 4 years onto that, that research is now 10 years old. And as you said, the way things are advancing in our modern scientific world, like 10 years is considered ancient, archaic. Like how are you still using that method?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So I told that I'm a PhD student in Tel Aviv University, and so in parallel to it, I want to talk about your time in Israel, because you were selected as Zacharan STEM Leadership Scholar at the University of Haifa, working in Professor Beverly Goodman Chernov's lab. You switch from studying ancient rocks in Canada to using high-tech Litrax core scanning on marine sediments in the Mediterranean. So, working in such a specialized high-tech environment abroad, what was the most valuable lesson you took back with you to Canada? Was it a technical skill, or did it change the way you solve geological problems today?
For me, it was not so much a technical skill. It's more of what I would consider a soft skill. Um, I yes, I was studying ancient Cretaceous age rocks for my PhD, but for my undergraduate and my master's, I was working in the Holocene as well. The difference, or where the similarities, is with using this ITRAX core scanning machine, which is an ultra high resolution machine that I can collect data points from split sediment cores at 200 micron. Actually, I believe the newest iteration of the machine can go down to 100 micron resolution. And it's collecting elemental data at every single point down 100 micrometers of core. Um, so I did that for my PhD in ancient Cretaceous mudstones. I took that same technology and kind of those same ideas to expand it into Holocene, where generally the sedimentary record is more complete. You don't deal with compaction. You're not dealing with as many periods of erosion or non-deposition in the Holocene. So it was a fairly linear shift for me that way in terms of the technical. The most valuable thing, as I said, with this soft skill is just working abroad, similar to traveling, just as a personal, just for fun or enjoyment. It opens your eyes to other viewpoints, other ways that people see the world, other ways that they approach the world. And academia is no different. I spent all of my degrees working at McMaster. I did my bachelor's, my master's, and my PhD at McMaster University, all of them under the supervision of Dr. Ed Reinhardt. So, in that sense, my academic experience could be considered actually quite narrow because I've done it with a single researcher in a single lab group. Where I had the benefit is that Ed Reinhardt does research kind of globally, and so I had a chance to do research projects in Israel in 2005. Actually, I was there for the first time. I did research in Mexico. I did research in Italy, and I was doing that research combined with other disciplines, mainly archaeology. Um, I minored in archaeology in my bachelor, so I am technically a geoarchaeologist, where I use the geologic record to answer archaeological questions where the historical record may have been erased or the archaeological record might be missing. Um, and so it's being able to experience views from other disciplines, from other universities, from other researchers, and from other countries. The scientific method itself is supposed to be very unbiased. We have a very strict method for how we form a hypothesis and how we form our plan for how we're going to test that hypothesis and the results that come out of it. But that doesn't mean that researchers don't have their own biases based on their personal experiences. How much have they been out traveling? Are they focused on the workings of a single university, or are they focused on several universities that have done research in other countries where you're experiencing just other ways of doing things? Not right, not wrong, just a different way of doing it. And it really helps to broaden, and it gives you a tool set to now start approaching problems from different angles and coming up with different ways how I might solve this problem because I have had experience working with other researchers. Of course, the sort of danger in that is you have so many ideas then, and then as we were talking about before with project management, your scope just starts going way, way, way up. And so you still have to be cognizant and keep yourself on task, but you do certainly bring in the experiences from other researchers. Um, yeah, and I mean, you yourself, we met in Dr. Goodman Chernov's lab. You taking a break from analyzing geophysical data to look at little forams in the microscope,
Yeah, I did it for
right?
6 months, and thanks for helping me in that. You gave me a lot of, as a senior colleague, a lot of advices which I still remember. It was a great experience. So thank you.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I'm glad you took the chance on something that seemed to me to be completely outside of your main background, your main academic focus.
Yeah, but now I can flex before geophysical guys and telling to them about forums, and they don't know what it is, and I just like kind of look smart at least look smart. So it helps me. It helps like a junior researcher to establish himself before someone just talk about forums and wow, tsunami forums. What is that? What is the connection? So yeah,
Yeah.
it was great. Uh, so take me back to before your PhD and before the mortgage broking activity. Was there a specific moment, age, or experience, maybe a childhood trip or a specific teacher where you knew I'm going to be a geoscientist?
So it wasn't childhood. For me, I didn't actually really experience geoscience and earth science until I was in university. I was in my second year of university when I took my first earth science course. I grew up in a small town, and in our high school, you just did the three main sciences, physics, chemistry, and biology. That was all. So I didn't have any exposure to geosciences. However, I can say that my passion for science in general goes back to my childhood and especially spending time with my grandfather. He was a civil engineer, but anytime we were together, he was always teaching me physics concepts or we were discussing math problems. When we would go camping in the summer, he would be pointing out the constellations and we'd be discussing astronomy. Um, so that's kind of really what set me in motion to the sciences. I mean, even my sister and my cousins, when we were growing up, decided that we didn't need to go to school anymore because Papa knows everything and Papa can teach us
Yeah,
everything. So why do I need to bother with all the rest of this stuff that I don't really enjoy? So that's what really got me focused on science. And then again, from those experiences, physics was my main focus. Um, until I got to university and kind of really started jumping into physics and all the math behind it. Um, I struggled with some of the math. I certainly could have put more time into it than I did, but I realized that that's not something that I want to continue the rest of my academic career on because mainly I didn't see where I could take it in the future. I felt it was just academic knowledge that I was gaining, and maybe I become a high school teacher and just continue teaching physics. But when I took earth science as an elective in my second year of university, that opened my eyes. And that was this, we went on, I remember it, we went on a field trip, and here in Hamilton, Ontario, we are surrounded by a geologic feature known as the Niagara Escarpment. And it's a 440 million year old Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian carbonate reef deposit, basically. It's about 35 to 40 meters tall where we are. It also extends down Niagara Falls, flows over the Niagara Escarpment. It extends all the way up north into Lake Huron and down around Michigan. Um, and going on that field trip and getting a sense of time, like 440 million years didn't even really make sense to me at the time. Like it's just a number that's so
yeah,
far out there from anything you experience in everyday life. And also the fact that these are mostly carbonate sediments deposited in warm, shallow tropical seas. And anybody who has been to Hamilton or Toronto knows that we are absolutely not warm and tropical. We have a fair bit of snow on the ground outside today.
wow,
Um, and so that idea also of the motion of the continents during the Silurian what was the landmass that is now North America. Of course, it was a much different orientation. That actually sat about 10 degrees south of the equator, whereas now we're sitting up at 55 degrees north of the equator. So it was those kind of concepts, and combined with the enthusiasm and engagement of the instructor. The instructor really was passionate about what she did, which I cannot say I noticed from my physics and math professors. Um, and so that's what convinced me. That was the spark that said, okay, you know what? Next year, my third year, I'm switching into the geoscience program, and I'm going to go full steam into studying the Earth.
Wow, well, it is great to hear. You know, I already talked with some folks who I interviewed them, and will release the interview soon. And many of them, like the majority of them, they say that their love for geosciences came either from a teacher or from a parent or from like a close relative. So it's like really I'm seeing the trend, and it's like sort of, I mean, it's good when you have a mentor either in the family or in the institution that leads you, and yeah, I mean, it's really a luck for people who got into the science.
Yeah, and so I'm hoping to pass that on now through my teaching and mentorship of students, but also my 10-year-old nephew often likes to call himself a geologist now because of my teachings onto him and always pointing out the rocks. And they live out in British Columbia, so they're in the mountains. Um, and yeah, so he's always coming to me with questions about rocks and where he can find minerals and stuff like that.
Yeah, so kol kavod, good job. It's
Right.
yeah, you're investing in one more geoscientist potentially.
Hopefully.
Uh, yeah.
My sister's a biologist, so it's overcoming those two sciences, and we'll see who wins out.
Wow. Yeah. So let me know about the result.
All right.
Yeah. We talked about the positive side and the mentorship and everything that helped you to get into the science. But I actually I'm really interested in the following. That's why I ask every guest this question to again track the trends in our field. What was the single biggest hurdle, whether financial, academic, or mental, that you personally had to overcome to succeed in the geosciences?
So my biggest hurdle, I would say, is academic, despite where I have ended up in the amount of time that I've spent in academia. And again, going back to my first and second year of university when I was in physics, not engaged, not really trying very hard, and I had an academic record to kind of prove that and go along with it. And at McMaster University, our undergraduate average works on a cumulative system. So even though I didn't need any of these courses for my geosciences degree, they still impacted my overall average, which brought me down out of initially brought me down out of qualifications for an honors bachelor's because I didn't have the grades high enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was also uh, potentially going to impact my ability to get, certainly if I can't do an honors bachelor's, a 4-year degree that we have here in Canada, um, I wouldn't have been able to do a master's degree. So I had to overcome that. And so I worked, and that's when I started um, engaging with professors. Um, my professor, who I ended up working with, Dr. Edward Reinhardt, who incidentally was also Beverly's PhD supervisor. So we have a whole connection through that. But
Yeah.
I actively approached him. I actively pursued him, letting him know that, I know what kind of research you do. I'm very interested in this research. Of course, I'm only in third year geosciences at the time, so really my fourth year of university. But so I don't have ideas of my own at this point, but I just know that I really want to start working. And so I'm exceptionally grateful to this guy. He saw my potential. He saw that I was working towards this, and so essentially went to bat for me. And even though my grades weren't quite the best, he made a uh, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Plea is a little extreme. But he went to the department basically saying, Jeremy is good. I want to work with this guy. His grades in the geosciences are certainly sufficient to get him in. He shows the interest. And so then he took me on. I was able to do my honors thesis, my bachelor's thesis with him, which was done scuba diving in Mexico. So I'm also eternally grateful for experiences like that
Yeah.
he provided me. Um, and yeah, so then it was just a constant. I ended up, I was the first author. That was my first publication, first author, and I published my undergraduate research in the Journal of Paleolimnology. I presented that research at a conference in Ottawa, Ontario, at Carleton University, and so that's how I overcame those marks. I can't erase those marks from the past, but I can show you that they were um, situational. And when I got myself into the right situation, that's where I can really contribute, and that's where I can show my strengths and my drive and my desire and my passion for geosciences. So it required work, and it required reaching out, which is a difficult thing to do in universities often when you have a professor at the front of the class of 150, 200 students. You give them almost like a celebrity status, and you think, oh, I can't just like walk up and talk to this person. There's no way I can do that. I'm going to have to find, maybe I get introduced at a function or an event. But no, I always tell my students, it's like you just need to take that initiative. You need to go and show that you have interest in doing the work, right? Not
Yeah.
just the
Yeah.
grades that show I know how to do the work, but you have to be able to work well with your supervisor.
Yeah, I mean it it's definitely, I mean, you have to definitely talk with the professors and the teachers, and I don't know like what is the culture in Canada, but here in Israel I really like that you like call professors by the first name, and they're really easy to approach, and whichever like problem you have, you can even go up to the head of the department, and she'll spend like time with you explaining whatever you did not understand. So, I mean, do you cultivate this kind of stuff in your environment with your students? Did you bring that culture from Israel, or did it exist in Canada before?
It did, at least in the earth science department, it existed. I had no problems going to anyone in the department who I thought could help me. In my PhD, I was struggling with um, I am going to generate this data set of over 185,000 observations with 50 or so elements per observation, which is an extreme amount of data. Like, and
Yeah,
to try to find patterns in data like that, even if I could, even plotting it out, there's just so much variation, it looks like a lot of noise. So I knew I had to do something, and the culture that I experienced in our department at McMaster, we have a lot of geographers and social scientists working in our department as well. These are people who deal with big data on a regular basis. So I went to one of them. I arranged an appointment um, and just sat down and said, "Look, this is the issue I'm having. What are there some guidelines you can kind of give me?" And he looked at it as a spatial problem that he deals with, neighborhoods around a city or cities around a province or a country or something like that. And when you're dealing with a core in vertical spatial um, vertical space, you almost forget that no, if I just turn this horizontally, I'm into a very similar environment that geographers or social scientists are typically looking at. And so it was that kind of guidance and that help that really helped me through my PhD. And so yeah, I did not ever feel any issue with going to just approach and ask questions.
yeah, wow, well, great. So let's talk about a also kind of tortuous way that you're describing, like going through some difficulties or changes, maybe, because I want to talk about how you stepped out of the academic system multiple times, working at the Pendion and Mortgage Alliance, which gave you a very broad generalist skill set. Many students are terrified that if they leave the academic system or don't specialize immediately, they will fall behind their peers. Did you ever feel that anxiety, like of this sort? And what is your advice to the student who has too many interests and is afraid to step off the traditional path?
So while I was completing my master's, I wasn't actually considering a career in academia. So the next move for me was moving into industry and doing something outside. Now studying um, paleoclimates, and I studied forams and thecamebans as well for my master's and other um, climate proxies. It's not very applicable to a lot of industry applications. It's fairly niche. Um, so this job was in Saudi Arabia as an environmental consultant was presented to me through a former colleague. Again, just my kind of network that I had developed just through speaking and talking with people. Um, and it was a large environmental remediation project that I was working on in Saudi Arabia. We were trying to um, remediate and rehabilitate roughly 800 kilometers of Saudi Arabian's Gulf shoreline, which was impacted by an oil spill during the 1991 Gulf War. Um, and it was it was really like the best mix of science and kind of work because we were doing um, field tests, we were doing pilot studies, we were trying to figure out how can we do the minimal amount of work in these environments to get the maximum amount of results. Generally, in an oil spill situation, if you get an oil spill along the coast, this happened with the Deepwater Horizon in 2008. The intertidal salt marshes are very, very sensitive environments, and often you will do more damage to the environment trying to go in and clean up the oil after the fact than if you just let it sit by itself. At the end of the day, oil is a natural product. There are microorganisms, there are bacteria, there are microbes that are breaking that down as long as they have the oxygen and the conditions to allow them to grow and break those down. In Saudi, they didn't have that. So we had to develop a plan how we were going to remediate. We had to study what are my limiting factors. So all of that on the science side of things. But then it also gave me my first experience in project management because we were also managing the project. This is 800 kilometers of shoreline. There were six of us working for the company. We are not going to do the work to remediate 800 kilometers of shoreline. So that work was contracted out to civil and marine engineering firms in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And so that work gave me it was the best. It was kind of the best of both worlds. Um, and being out there kind of on my own, my first task, my first responsibilities were really to go back and resurvey these habitats to kind of assess their overall health. And that way we could take a targeted approach to work on the worst ones and try to get them going again. The amount that I learned, because I'm basically dropped in a very foreign environment to me, working in the deserts and coastline of Saudi Arabia, um, and working with one other geoscientist at the time. And so you have to observe everything. When you're in academia, and certainly changes when you're doing a PhD or a postdoc, but undergrad and masters, your focus is being somewhat guided to a specific thing. Whereas in this case, I had to pay attention to all the things. I had to pay attention to the plants and the burrowing infauna, the crabs and the worms. I had to pay attention to the hydrology. I had to pay attention to the coastal dynamics. And so it just immediately makes you a more well-rounded researcher. And and that's just in the geosciences, but even in, and if I went through my entire CV of all the different jobs that I've had, that would take up our full 45 minutes at least, because I've done a lot. But it's all experiences that you gain, and leading back into kind of the project management side of things, they are all experiences in dealing with how to manage your scope of the project and the cost and the time it takes you to get things done. And so all of those just contribute to my work now and give me ideas of how I can approach things differently.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about the scope of things that you told me about, 800 kilometers and not like a 100 man team. So, I mean, it occurs to me that management skills like so important because whatever knowledge you put into the project, if it's badly planned, then you will just end up with a disaster. So, yeah, like our entire life basically is a project, and you have to manage it also really
Exactly.
cleverly.
Yep, that is
Yeah,
exactly right.
yeah. So we've been talking now about the environmental studies and projects, and I wanna talk about that a little bit. So you spent years investigating climatic variations in the Cretaceous period, so-called greenhouse Earth. So when you look at the modern climate crisis today, does your background in deep time make you more optimistic because Earth has survived already extremes before, or more worried because you know how drastic and violent these changes can be?
Um, that's a tricky one to think about. And I mean, what it's really shown me, aside from the complexity, and I find that's kind of the um, hardest thing to get across to non-geoscientists is just how complex the climate system is. And there's just this thought, well, we just take the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Well, that's going to have other impacts and other implications um, down the line that um, we can kind of work to predict, but really we can't be certain of what that impact is going to be. There is a lot of our entire um, plant life on the planet relies on carbon dioxide. So getting that complexity across, but in terms of a geoscientist and kind of the knowledge that most geoscientists would have, where my research has really opened my eyes is how much variation we have been missing in the past as a result of just lower resolution studies, as a result of the limit. So the the core that I was working on in Haifa, the first project that I was working on, a previous PhD student had come through and analyzed the other half of that core, and they did it at a 1 centimeter resolution. And I'm not sure if you did the uh, educational cruise course at the University of Haifa, where you collect sediment cores from the bottom of the Mediterranean and then subsample them out. But 1 centimeter resolution is certainly doable. It takes a fair amount of time and some precision to make sure you're getting there. Half-centimeter resolution, now you're really starting to get into something technical. Anything lower than that, I mean, I would argue that humans just don't really have the dexterity to be able to start getting down into smaller than that. But even that 1 centimeter resolution, that 1 centimeter was homogenizing about 100 years worth of sedimentation. And I'm taking a data point then every 100 years or so. I don't really start to see patterns emerging until I get to 5 or 6 data points. right? And even that's probably a little
Sure, sure.
sparse. Like ideally, you want to be up 10, 15. You need some data points to start. So now suddenly, um, I am looking at a record that's, I can see what's happening on millennial scale, maybe down to several centennial scale. And we're trying to compare those results and we're trying to compare that data to the historical records that we have, which provide down to seasonal or even monthly variations in weather patterns and climate. Um, and so when we see, oh, but those records only go back a couple centuries. So we're now looking historically at a record of 250 years, which has a whole lot of variability in it, and um, a lot of the language around it is that we are seeing changes that we haven't seen in the history of the planet before, and that could very well be the case. But the other thing is the record that we have of the planet before, we're looking at 500-year resolution. So I don't even like my historical record hasn't even reached the scale of kind of like a reliable single reading in the historical record. Whereas now with this advanced technology that we can start doing things down to 100 microns, absolutely impossible to do um, by hand or to analyze any other way. Now we start to see, I was seeing very rapid variations, and even my stuff from the Cretaceous period, each one of my sample points averaged about 18 months of climate data. And I was taking a sample point every 3.5 to 4 years through that time span. So
Wow.
now we can really see the rapidity and also have a large suite. Of course, with ice cores from Antarctica, from Greenland, we do have very, very high resolution sedimentation and we can analyze, but generally we're only analyzing stable isotopes in those. We're carbon 13, oxygen 18. We don't have the full suite of elements that are being maintained and preserved in the geologic record like we have in marine basins like the Mediterranean, or it was the Western Interior Seaway that I was studying from before. North America was flooded during the Upper Cretaceous,
Yeah.
and a seaway connected the Arctic Ocean all the way to the Gulf of Mexico.
Wow. So, like, generally, you are positive or negative about like what's coming?
So generally, I would say it's I'm on the fence. Certainly, it's going to be a drastic change to human society. And I think we need to start accepting that a little more rather than still convincing ourselves that this is a problem that can be solved and we can just stop the climate from changing, because you're not going to stop the climate from changing. We can slow down climate change. But I mean, modern humans in their history of 500,000 years have gone through several glacial and interglacial periods where the environment drastically changes. And those humans back then, though, were still nomadic. They were still much more mobile. They roamed around, and if things weren't working out in one region, they moved to another. We now are trying to be much more permanent.
Yeah.
And being a permanent civilization on an ever-changing planet, somebody's going to lose that battle. And it's probably not going to be the planet.
Wow. Right. Yeah, we have to think about it. Have to think
So
about
yeah,
all the kind of things, policies.
yeah, and I think that's not to say that we need to ignore the burning of fossil fuels. Just looking, you'll see it from the University of Haifa looking down into Lower Haifa. You got that brown smog layer that kind of is over the city. We see it in Toronto. You see it. That's a health hazard. That's not good to have. We should absolutely be doing something to get rid of that. But I do think we need to start focusing more on how are we going to handle the changing climate? How are we going to handle sea level rise, which is going to continue to happen um, for the foreseeable future, anyways? And um, hurricane intensity, I mean, I don't believe there is solid evidence to say that hurricane intensity is increasing, but it certainly makes a lot of sense. They feed off the warm ocean, warming oceans, further north, more hurricanes, more intensity. Um, so how are we going to handle that?
Oh, not so many people think about it, about the connection of the hurricanes and the warming climate and warming water. So thank you for bringing this up.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So about extreme environments. Recently, you worked as a course developer for the Abu Dhabi Experimental College, creating a curriculum for the Leva Desert. I understand that the university isn't open yet, so you're designing this on paper. So, since you have done fieldwork in extreme environments before, how did you draw on your past experience to design a course for such a harsh landscape? What are the biggest logistic challenges students need to be prepared for in those environments?
You have to take into account a couple of things, and I would say the biggest thing there is now your biggest limitation is now time. Um, when I am here in Ontario in the summertime, we used to run a field course um, up in kind of central Ontario, 25 degrees Celsius through the day, nice blue skies, sunny. You need to have your sunscreen on, but um, the students were free to just kind of move around. We didn't have a whole lot of logistical issues to take care of. And we were quite close still to a town, to some infrastructure. If something went wrong, it's not that far to get to a clinic, to get to a hospital, to get to a grocery store or a hardware store. Maybe we need some food, we need some water, we need different tools. It's not that difficult to just quickly run out and get it. Working in the Leva Desert, which is 2 hours south of Abu Dhabi, you don't have those options. Like everything has to be thought out and planned. So my time becomes my biggest constraint. In these conditions, and I was working in them in Saudi Arabia, where we would regularly have thermometer temperatures over 50 degrees Celsius. Then you have high humidity of 80 to 85% on top of that on the Gulf Coast. The Arabian Gulf is incredibly hot, and so it creates very humid conditions all along Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, when you're on the coast. Um, so you really can't be doing 8 hour days out in the field in those kind of conditions. Maybe you could do one or two. You're certainly not doing a week-long field course in conditions like that. Your body just can't take it. So time becomes now my biggest constraint. Then we need to look at cost. Most of these things are out in remote areas. So I have to make sure I have purchased and I have got all of the equipment and all of the materials that I'm going to need. And in some cases, these are specialized materials. A different type of environment. As I said, I did my research, undergrad and master's scuba diving. That brings in a whole other extreme environment. Now I'm working underwater. I'm working quite deep. I don't have the option of, oh, I forgot to bring this. I'm just going to bounce back up to the boat, grab it, and come back down. I have to go through a full decompression profile. So, um, and that equipment is very expensive for scuba diving. So then cost becomes something. And so with those two, now it's even more important that I am really thinking about the scope of the work that either I am performing myself or that I expect the students to be able to accomplish in a given amount of time, because they're not going to be able to work at the same pace as somebody who is in 25 degrees Celsius and close to town, and they woke up in the morning at home and they had breakfast at home, and then they just got themselves out to the field site fairly easily. So um, that's where I draw. And because of my experience working in Saudi Arabia, doing scuba diving, needing to plan this out, um, and then even more so scuba diving in foreign countries, they may not have the equipment that I need. It might not be easy as just going to the hardware store like it is here. So a lot more pre-planning, which increases costs because now I got to be transporting this stuff. So I really have to be thinking about scope. And you can get it in your mind that because you're going out to a remote area, I need to make sure I'm accomplishing as much as I can. Like I really need to be getting lots and lots and lots of data, and I need to be doing all this work. And you're gonna kind of blind yourself and get focused on doing the work, and suddenly the whole day has gone by. You haven't drank enough water, you haven't had breaks, you haven't taken a chance to get yourself out of the environment, however that may be. Um, and yeah, so and then your health will start to suffer because of it.
Yeah, well, that's yeah. These are crazy environments, and yeah, I think you got a lot of experience working in them. Uh, so finally, looking at the next generation of researchers, in just one single word, how would you describe the future of the geosciences?
The one word I would use is critical. Geoscientists are taught right from the beginning to treat the Earth as a system. You have the atmosphere, the lithosphere, the hydrosphere, and the biosphere. The cryosphere fits into the hydrosphere there. Some people separate it out. But the point is that the Earth operates as a system. Every one of those spheres influences and is in turn influenced by all of the rest of them. They do not operate um, individual of each other. And that's where the geoscience education and having more geoscientists is critical to being able to understand this. Um, I find uh, generally, this is through my experience looking for jobs in the industry, engineers tend to be favored over geoscientists. Engineers know how to get something done. They are less concerned about the why. They go to a place, I'm looking, can I build a building here? Yes, I can build a building in this location. Not thinking so much about why does this location currently exist as it does, and what outside factors do I have that are influencing this? Do I have sediments that are being actively eroded from underneath? You can look at images of the Hamptons in New York State on the Atlantic Ocean, very wealthy area, long beaches, and every district wants to maintain their beach. Well, you've got a longshore drift that's taking sediments away from the north and carrying them down to the south. So what they do is they just build a whole bunch of berms to block that. Well, now you have a whole bunch of these cuspate beaches because everything's piling up. Again, you're not going to stop these sediments from moving anywhere. Engineers just look at how can I stop it, not why are the sediments moving in the first place. And so that's why I would say that the geosciences are critical to understanding how and coming up with plans of how we are going to deal with future climate change and population growth and I mean tectonics. Just at some point, the middle of the North American continent where Yellowstone National Park is getting thinner. At some point, that might just rip itself apart. That has nothing to do with humans putting CO2 into the atmosphere. Those are the workings of the planet as a whole, and so that's something else that has to be taken into account. You have to consider these things.
Yeah, Jeremy, I totally agree with you. We need more geoscientists, and yeah, we need to address the, as you know, maybe you know that there is decline in the U.S. and all around the world in the students who chose geosciences as their majors. So it is happening exactly at the time where we need them the most. And yeah, it's sad to hear that engineers are like being chosen over geoscientists. I mean, both are important, but you have to think about the reasons also for the things happening.
Yeah, and the
So
other thing that I find interesting is that this decline in enrollment in the geosciences is also at the same time that everybody is having an opinion on how we are destroying the planet.
yeah,
But nobody seems to, like, fewer and fewer people seem to want to actually look into this matter and study it and see how we can change it. Like that's the only thing. Like unless you understand the system, you can't come up with a solution to change it.
sure. That's a perfect phrase to think about and to wrap up our interview. Jeremy, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I got a lot of insights from listening to you. And your story also is very interesting, and it proves that no experience is wasted, and that the best career paths are often the winding ones. So I really appreciate your work, your time. Thank you so much, and all the best to you and your students in studies.
My pleasure, Lexi. Thank you very much for interviewing me and allowing me to share my story and my experiences.